Today's video is on a topic that I honestly didn't think would be coming up so soon, especially on this channel, given it is probably highly ironic to many of you out there. And that is around social media detoxing, or just a digital detox in general. Now, the astute among you will have probably realized or figured out that I'm not really that active recently on Instagram and YouTube. And in the first instance, this detox was by no means something that I had wanted actively to happen. I just fell out of routine with my busy work life, things going on in my personal life, lots of change going on, and in my priority lists of things to do. Unfortunately, as fun as Instagram and YouTube and just content creation is, it's ultimately my side hustle, it's my hobby. After a few things happened in my life, one of them was not specific to me, but I think everybody experienced, for example, when basically the internet almost went down, at least all the social media sites anyway, so the likes of Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, I think they all went down. The breathing space actually that the apocalypse actually gave me was so eye-opening. I wanted to continue it. And so then after that, I embarked on more proactive and longer stints of digital detoxing, the longest one being I think probably almost a month, not really posting and stuff. And obviously I would check in here and there just to make sure that I didn't completely drop off the face of the earth. But on the whole, I would say I have honestly had a very life-changing experience. I know it might sound like a cliche or somewhat of an over-exaggeration, but in today's generations, Gen Z, where they are constantly glued to their phones, I honestly felt like I was figuratively and literally escaping the matrix. I've kind of alluded to these topics before, but I wanted to make a dedicated video just in case you are very fatigued with the monotony of online and daily life, and maybe it's affecting your mood or it's affecting your productivity. I do think this is an important topic, not just for content creators because of how much pressure there is on people like us to post, to also know when it's time to reel back on social media and online, because online isn't real life. And I guess now is a good time for me to transition into the why I wanted to do this digital detox. And the first reason is, to be honest, the most urgent one, is that was just fatigue and keeping up with everybody online. And I think it detached me a lot from the real world, what was going on in my actual personal and work life. I felt like I was so busy, not necessarily keeping up appearances, because what you see on Instagram and YouTube is a part of my life. It is just, however, a very, very small and honestly insignificant part of my day. Even if you are trying to be as authentic as possible online, you are just not going to be the same person around your friends or your family or even by yourself. I think there's like a Japanese quote or something where they say that people have three faces: one for the outside world, one for their friends and family, and one for themselves that no one else but them sees. And I think that is so correct. I feel like online we give a very, very different and pepped up, amped up version of ourselves. We put our best foot forward, but obviously life is not like that. And obviously in the nature of privacy and just, I guess, practicality, it's just not feasible for us to, unless you are live streaming your life all the time like the Truman Show, which is another topic for another time, very interesting. But that's just not realistic to get your authentic self across. But also that has a detriment because, to be honest, after establishing somewhat a routine on Instagram and YouTube, I was becoming very detached from reality, and I was so preoccupied with replying to people online, engaging online, which you should do in this line of work, in social media. And obviously digital in and of itself is an innocent tool, and a tool that is used for good in terms of connecting people from across the world and creating communities where you otherwise would be disconnected, being a wealth of knowledge and skills and sharing in general. But it is also a double-edged sword, and it can be used for bad, or it can even have bad side effects. And I honestly felt like the more I was online, the less I was present, and it actually had knock-on impacts, which I'll go into now as some of the other follow-on reasons. So another one is around, I wanted to improve my mental capacities, my mental health. Not like I'm depressed or anything, but certainly when you see the research about, you know, young girls when they download TikTok and Instagram, the amount of girls that are depressed or suicidal on one end, or just, you know, on the less extreme end, then they are at the bare minimum anxious or self-conscious. I got a phone when I was probably 14, 15 at the time. Nowadays kids are getting phones at 5, maybe even younger. Some of them know how to unlock their mum's phone using her fingerprint or her face, and it's just crazy. And you hear of these crazy stories where they buy a load of stuff, or in mini games they buy loads of coins, and it's funny, but it's also scary because kids are getting those things younger and younger. They're being exposed to social media younger and younger, and you know, it has an impact whether people like it or not, whether it's overt or not. It will have over time a conditioning piece to it. It will have impacts over their concentration, their productivity. I mean, no one can deny with the mindless scrolling of Instagram Reels and TikToks. I mean, I don't use TikTok primarily because it's Chinese spyware, but that's for another day. But also because it is just attention grabbing trash, in my opinion. Now, I know that some people will say it's not that different from Instagram Reels, and that is truism, but I'm not going to download a separate app dedicated to just sucking out every brain cell in my mind. Or I sometimes catch myself on Instagram, you know, it could be first thing in the morning, last thing at night, it could be 10 minutes, then it goes to 30 minutes, 40 minutes, that I'm just mindlessly scrolling. And that dopamine hit is, you know, every 10, 15 seconds. I've seen videos and there are studies on what this does to your brain. And certainly that is time that I could have spent on other things. Whereas actually, is that dopamine hit really worth it? So it's impacting on concentration, my ability to digest information, my ability to think critically as well. That's something that I think is really underplayed, with the fact that information is just presented to you and you don't have to do any interrogation, any analysis. It's just something that you are just taught the total opposite of when you're at school, to think critically, to make sure that you interrogate your sources, to make sure that you do further research. And it also felt like I was becoming a lot more anxious to get the next dopamine hit from another video or something, anxious to, you know, maybe even post something similar, anxious to see what latest notifications are coming up on my phone, just constantly in a state of being switched on, always on, 24/7 to see what is coming up next. And I would get so excited, and I still want to do it in a weird, sad way. You know, I'd be one of those people who would love seeing a notification of a comment or follows, or, you know, even new emails and things like that. But it got to a point where I was like, hang on, I'm not sleeping in a routine way now, because looking at a small screen before sleep is, you know, impacting my well-being. And I also felt anxious about comparing my life to others, even though it's not by any means intentional. It's gonna happen, you know. We, especially as women, I think we are very self-critical, and we also try and place ourselves on a totem pole or at some sort of ranking on our own scores as well as others. And it's just not very healthy, is it, to constantly be on a platform where it's just everybody putting their best foot forward. Even if we realize that fact, it's something that seeps in the back of your brain. And when you're surrounded by so much perfection and your algorithms online recommend and push more of that content to you, it can be kind of overwhelming. And that leads me nicely into my next reason I wanted a detox, and that is, of course, wanting to improve my productivity. I wanted to, you know, use that time spent on scrolling, commenting, posting about my life, and channel it into learning something, into speaking to people. Even if I was just gonna do nothing and I'd walk outside and just get some vitamin D, then that would be what I would do, and that would be better spent than just staring at a phone screen. I wanted to start reading again. I wanted to read more articles. I wanted to read more books. I'd gotten into such a good rhythm a few months ago, and I fell out of it just because purely of convenience. And, you know, everything in your smartphone is just at the palm of your hand. I felt like the practicality of a phone was honestly being outweighed by the negatives and drawbacks that I was getting as side effects. And finally, but also importantly, I wanted to detox my life for the pure and simple reason of regaining a lot of privacy in my life, and therefore safety and security. I don't think it needs to really be said that obviously by posting online and be constantly online, you are obviously sharing your whereabouts, what you're up to, etc., basically 24/7. And while you might not be somebody that is on Instagram posting the restaurants you were at, the people you're hanging out with, the places you visited all the time, and I personally make a point out of delaying those posts and making sure that nobody knows that for a reason. I've definitely dialed that down even more so nowadays to where I only post highlights where I feel like it's funny or special or something that I would want to share for one reason or another that might be useful. My day is not that important to strangers out there. People don't need to know your everyday movements. I don't think people, however, are interested necessarily in what you ate this morning, again, unless they really ask for it. I wanted to limit how much I was posting online because the more that I am present online, obviously I'm not present offline in the real world, but also I leave myself vulnerabilities for people to notice a location, notice a tag. And obviously it comes, some people say, obviously as part of the territory of being somewhat of a public figure, but I do think you can try and do the tango and go somewhere in between. So those are my reasons why I embarked on this journey. I guess I'll go into some of them, like I mentioned, the short and long term things that I have been doing. So examples of some of the short-term measures I've done was more just like to adjust my behavior a little bit so that I would change my mindset slowly. So it'd be small things like leaving my phone outside the bedroom. I also did things like obviously using the do not disturb, the focus time notifications. You can get those on your iPhone. I'm sure on Android you have something very similar, but I would have that switched on from about like 10 o'clock onwards to 7 a.m. anyway. And I then just made sure that I wouldn't stay on social media for more than like 15-minute increments at a time. And I would also make sure that if I caught myself actively mindlessly scrolling, that I would stop then and there. And I would also do things like turning my phone on its other side so the screen wasn't facing up. Or if I'm with somebody, I wouldn't even take my phone out and put it on the table. Outside of these things with regards to the phone, more physical things would be like just going out for a walk. When was the last time we all decided to go out for a walk and have conversations with real people in the real world? Back in the days, like the 1500s or whatever, there was no issues with tech neck and bad spines, misaligned spines, because people were always looking up. There were astronomers, meteorologists. When they would be speaking in public, they would also look up and out. Nowadays, everybody's looking down because of technology, the small screens. Everybody's looking down. So actually walking, not to go on so much of a tangent, but walking was a bid for me to go and, whoever I'm hanging out with, go for a walk and it would be undisturbed, no phones out. And sometimes I would even, leave my phone at home if it was a short distance away, familiar territory, obviously, so that we could also have a truly private conversation. Obviously, with the nature of how technology has come about, with geolocation, tracking, and 5G, being able to pinpoint where you are at a certain moment in time, and this is no joke, this is not dystopian stuff, this is actual, look it up, create a path of your digital footprint throughout the days, weeks, and months. It is pretty scary to think about. And it's also, privacy is something, it's not just about what you have to hide, and most people don't have things to hide. Like Edward Snowden said in his quote, and I'll paste it because I'll definitely butcher it, not caring about your privacy because you think you have nothing to hide is like not caring about your freedom of speech because you have nothing to say. So actively leaving my phone at home, not just for these walks, but also for small errands, and using actual softwares and tools like SatNav in my car, which I've not really touched because I use Google Maps a lot, checking things ahead of time if there's travel disruptions on TfL, that kind of thing. Anyway, now onto the longer term habits, the more drastic ones. So the first one I did was, I kind of did this throughout my life really, but I deleted most social media or really distracting apps on my phone. So I never will get Facebook. I've never had Twitter and any of the other social medias apart from Instagram and YouTube. And like I mentioned, I've deleted a lot of other distracting apps on my phone. I went through and did an audit, and a lot of these apps, they will ask for permissions. Some of you probably don't even know they're asking for location data and stuff, even if they are something like a news app or whatever, that is not even relevant. So I went through and I unticked certain permissions and things and revoked access where it was so not necessary. And I'm also, as another kind of more drastic move, I'm considering getting a dumb phone. And for some of you who don't know what that is, a dumb phone is essentially the phone that we would have had 20 years ago, you know, the brick, the Nokias, the Motorola's. I'm considering getting one that's maybe a slightly advanced that can actually go on the internet just in case, but just to go back to simplicity, you know, the only things people really need from me are to know my whereabouts and my safety, if that's, you know, something at night or if there's something like an emergency. So with all that being said, I thought I'd talk about how it's currently going, and obviously it's going well enough that I'm making this video. The benefits are such that you honestly cannot really begin to imagine them until you do it yourself, so I highly recommend a detox. Just challenge yourself for a few days or even just hours. Because although there's a hard adjustment period, I honestly feel liberated where I don't have to tell people, answer to people. It felt like I was answering to people as to where I am and what exciting stuff am I doing. I feel like I have a lot more breathing space in my thinking. I am not distracted by constant pinging. Even now when I'm outside of the house, when I'm walking, I don't even tend to now put music on. I look at the sky, I look at my surroundings, I take it all in, and I see a lot of people on their phones crouched. I am not as on edge because obviously notifications, they interrupt your daily cycle because you're constantly being pinged by something that's taking your attention. And I feel like I'm a little bit more focused now too. So those are the benefits that I've had so far. Obviously, this journey is far from over, and I think it really has opened my eyes to taking control over what digital can do for me. So that is all I wanted to mention on this topic today. It was a bit of a ramble, but I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Let me know your thoughts down below in terms of if you're thinking about doing a digital detox. Thank you as always for watching, and I will catch you in my next one.